Let's hit the rewind button. We're going to have a blast from the past today. I present you my Child's Play series review. This is actually from my first year of YouTube, so you'll notice the audio quality is not that great, but I thought I'd unearth these mostly because some of these do have copyright claims, so they've either been blocked in certain countries or even age restricted. So I wanted to bring them back a little bit, re-edit them, and put it in one convenient video for you. So I hope you enjoy watching.
The 1988 film Child's Play took the tried-and-true notion that dolls are creepy and it would make for a pretty good horror movie if one came to life and started killing people, and put it to its full potential. It's not the first killer doll movie ever made, and it certainly won't be the last, but I think there are a lot of factors that make this one stand out and has made it stand the test of time and sparked a very popular franchise that is still loved to this day. One factor, I think, strangely enough, is that it has just a little bit of relatability to it. What parent hasn't seen an insanely popular toy, whether it be Cabbage Patch Kids, Furbies, or Tickle Me Elmos, and had to do everything in their power to get it for their kid? The popular toy in question for this movie are the good guy dolls, which, to be honest, are kind of creepy looking to begin with, and when Andy Barclay's mom can't seem to find one anywhere, in desperation she buys one from a bum on the street. That should be a parental victory right there, and for a brief moment everything seems great, but things go sour once a bunch of mysterious murders start taking place, and little Andy claims his doll is possessed by the soul of a notorious serial killer that was recently killed in a police shootout. Talk about worst-case scenarios. That's pretty much the plot of Child's Play in a nutshell, though there's just a little more detail to it that adds to its story. Andy's doll, Chucky, is indeed possessed by that killer, Charles Lee Ray, the Lakeshore Strangler, who just before dying chanted a voodoo spell that transferred his body into the doll. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in the long run it does add to the charm of it all. Chucky isn't simply just an evil demonic doll or possessed by a ghost or anything. He's a human, with a human personality and a very human agenda. Chucky's goal is to get revenge on the people who played into his death, like his getaway driver who left him behind and the detective who shot him. And with all the voodoo stuff involved, it lays down some nifty ground rules that give Chucky even more incentive. Chucky finds out that the longer he stays in the doll's body, the more human he becomes in it, and if he stays in it too long, he's stuck there for good. The only way out is to transfer his soul into the first person he revealed his secret identity to. And that person just so happens to be, you guessed it, little Andy. So at its core, it is a cheesy killer doll movie, but because of all these interesting, unique little plot details, I think it puts it a step above average. Added to the fact that the animatronics are really good and pretty convincing for the most part, that really helps. After all, what's the point in having a movie where a doll comes to life and you just can't believe it? But I can't kid myself here. I need to give full credit where credit's due, and the biggest reason, the absolute #1 factor as to why Child's Play is so memorable is Brad Dourif. His voice talent as Chucky is legendary here. He pulled off an amazing job, and let's face it, without him there just wouldn't be a Child's Play franchise. He really taps into his mischievous and evil side here, and he gives Chucky the perfect personality. And seeing as how he went on to do 4 more sequels and countless interviews and promotional material as Chucky, you can tell he really has a lot of fun with the character. And because of Dourif, that makes Chucky worth noting in the same sentence as other horror icons such as Freddy or Jason. The other actors in the movie do a good job too. I'm not putting them down, even though you can't really compare them to Dourif's voice work. I thought Chris Sarandon was very good as a detective investigating the murders, and Catherine Hicks really carried a huge portion of the movie as Andy's mom. And the kid playing Andy, Alex Vincent, well, he isn't the greatest child actor in the world, I'm not gonna lie, but he does well enough as the sweet and innocent kid. At the end of the day, I don't think Child's Play is a horror classic or anything, though it's a perfectly fine movie and all, but to be perfectly honest, it's not even my favorite in the series. It doesn't really have that much rewatchability in my opinion, since for the first half of the movie they almost make it like a mystery where you don't see Chucky in action at all, and you're left wondering, I guess, if the doll really is doing all the killing, or maybe Andy's just disturbed. But Come on, we know from the very beginning it is Chucky. So waiting until the last half to see Chucky actually talk and interact with others is a little patience trying. You could argue that it's building up the tension, a la Jaws or something, but this isn't Hitchcock we're talking here. It's a killer doll movie. I want to see the killer doll. Fortunately, the sequels played up Chucky much, much more. So, even though it's far from being one of the best horror movies ever made, and it has some flaws, and there is plenty to enjoy with Child's Play. The plot is interesting, the acting's pretty good for a horror movie, the musical score is actually pretty spooky, the animatronics are top-notch, there are some pretty good moments of Chucky carnage, and Brad Dourif is just excellent in voicing Chucky. It's definitely worth a look. You may recall that at the end of the first Child's Play film, Chucky is burnt to a crisp and then shot several times until he was just a charred pile of limbs. So at the beginning of Child's Play 2, we see the Good Guy Doll Company reassembling and remodeling the same doll because, I don't know, any excuse to get Chucky back, I guess. But if you can get past that fault in logic, Child's Play 2 is actually a very good sequel, and in many ways it is an improvement over the original. So Chucky has his brand new body and he's off to settle an old score with Andy. He tracks him down to a home where he's living with his new foster parents, played by Jenny Uddiger and Garrett Graham. And just a side note, a bit of trivia about Garrett Graham, he actually did the voice of the character Franklin Sherman on the TV show The Critic, which is one of my all-time favorite animated characters, by the way. But anyway, Chucky switches places with another good guy doll conveniently already in the house, and he's set on possessing Andy once and for all. And every moment in between he's bent on creating as much trouble as possible, all while Andy's foster parents grow concerned that he's traumatized when he begins to suspect that Chucky is out to get him. One thing I really liked about this movie is that they really played up the humor this time around. Not only did they give us more Chucky and more one-liners, but the whole plot is just so funny and absurd. Chucky really makes poor little Andy's life a living hell, just relentlessly torturing him, getting him in trouble at home and at school, and nobody believes him when he says Chucky's alive. It's pretty dark humor, but it's almost like a horror sitcom, just one misunderstanding after another. Brad Dourif is once again great voicing Chucky, and I do have to say that Alex Vincent's acting is a lot better in this one. He's a little older, and it seems like he really had to step up his acting game for this one. He has a lot more emotions to convey. He's depressed about his mother being sent to a mental hospital after the events of the first movie. He's doing his best to fit in a new environment, and he becomes increasingly frustrated when no one believes him about Chucky. I thought the kid did a very good job. I also liked the relationship Andy developed with his foster sister, Kyle. It was nice and sweet, and I liked how we had those two kids who've had tough lives having to fight together against the ultimate childhood trauma that is Chucky. All in all, I thought it was just generally better than the first. I liked the story better, I liked the humor better, and the effects were better too. Everything was just a little better for this one. Just look at the ending. It's sort of similar to the first one in that they keep trying to kill Chucky, but the little fucker just won't die, but it was done just so much better in this one. And I thought choosing the Good Guy Doll Factory for the setting of the final showdown was actually kind of a stroke of brilliance. Just look at the punishment Chucky endures at the end. Let's see, he's crushed by a ton of toy boxes, he loses his hand and replaces it with a knife, he's stapled in the crotch, he's violated by an assembly machine, he's melted by hot plastic, and he's blown to smithereens by an air valve shoved down his throat. Chucky sure can take a hell of a licking, but as we all know, this wouldn't be the end of Chucky, and you can't keep a good guy down. The Good Guy Doll Company has been out of business for several years, probably due to bad PR, but when the business bounces back, new dolls are manufactured, and once again, Chucky finds himself in a new body. And here we have everyone's favorite killer doll back for another round in Child's Play 3. As far as I can tell, I guess the general fan consensus is that this is a fairly weak entry in the series, but I don't know, I've always liked it. The thing is, though, there's not really all that much good or bad to be said about it. It's good, it's entertaining, it's altogether decent enough, but there just isn't anything particularly special about it in the long run. I do like how they took it to a fairly unexpected setting this time around, and how they portrayed Andy being a little older. This one actually takes place at a military school where Andy finds himself after years of going back and forth through foster families. And the little twist in this one would be that Chucky isn't looking to possess Andy's soul this time, but since he's inhabiting a brand new body, Chucky figures out that a different kid he revealed his identity to, Ronald, would be the next in line for possession. That's voodoo semantics for you. So, the basic plot is that Chucky is after Ronald and Andy is doing everything in his power to stop him. All the while, of course, no one believes his story. When it comes to these kinds of movies, especially when it's the same kind of thing over and over, you can only really begin to distinguish them by the kills, and Chucky builds up a good body count in this one. There's a strangulation with a yo-yo, he crushes someone in a trash compactor, he slashes a barber's throat with his own shearer, and in one particularly evil move, he switches some paintball guns with real bullets and sits back to watch the carnage unfold. And as always, there's Chucky's trademark one-liners. So we have all the makings for a decent Chucky movie here, but for whatever reason, this one feels a little more mean-spirited. It's not quite as fun or absurd as the first two. It's strangely a little darker and more straightforward with its tone. And for the first time in this series, it really strikes you as how horrible it is that Chucky is completely ruining Andy's life. In one scene, Andy looks off into the distance to see an amusement park, where the film's climax actually takes place, and it occurs to him, and us at the same time, that he's never really had a childhood, and he's never had any kind of innocent fun in his life. It's kind of a bummer. Considering all that, is it still a good movie? Well, yeah, it is pretty good. I like how they at least made the setting different and made Andy older, giving him some new friends, and even a little romantic subplot with one of the girl cadets. And they at least tried to make it a little different, which was sort of well done considering the movie was only released actually less than a year after Child's Play 2. Production was kind of rushed. But like I said, there's nothing much wrong with it per se, but there's just nothing all that special about it. It's all about Chucky trying to possess a kid's soul and killing a bunch of people along the way. If that's all you're looking for in a Child's Play movie, then it's completely fine, and there's no reason why it's not much better or worse than the previous two. After Child's Play 3, the series appeared to have run out of steam and remained dormant for almost a decade until Bride of Chucky came along in 1998. This one changes pace completely, dropping the whole plotline with Andy, and instead focuses on Charles Lee Ray's girlfriend, Tiffany, who has been pining over Chucky for years and obsessing over the good guy doll murders, until she finally finds his dissected remains, sews him up, and brings him back to life. It's not exactly the fairy tale she expects, though, as things go horribly wrong and her soul is transferred into a doll herself. And their goal is to make their way to New Jersey to dig up Chucky's original remains so they can find the voodoo amulet he was buried with, which has the power to let them transfer their souls into any bodies they wish. Ridiculous? Sure, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. It's a very refreshing entry in the series, actually. It attempts many different things. Based on its title alone, it's kind of a tribute or throwback to the great Universal monster movies of the 30s and 40s. It's a very bloody horror movie with some entertaining kills. It's a good comedy with plenty of laughs. It's a self-referential slasher a la Scream. It's a fast-paced road movie, and yes, it's even a very morbid love story. Now, am I crazy? Am I totally bonkers out of my mind, or is this actually the best of the bunch? I know there are a lot of people who detest this movie and really didn't like how it leaned more towards comedy, but I really think this one uses the Chucky material to the best of its ability. It's a killer doll movie, for God's sake. It's going to be funny whether it takes itself seriously or not, so I think that embracing the silliness of it all was a great move, and it actually works very well to the movie's advantage. Plus, Chucky is focused on much more. He's not lurking in the shadows and popping up with a one-liner here and there. He's the star of the movie. He holds lengthy conversations, so Brad Dourif's voice talents are at their best use. And giving him a partner in crime was a fantastic addition, and I can't think of anyone better to voice the sexy psychopathic bride than Jennifer Tilly. The voice work is top-notch, and also the animatronics have never looked better, so When you add all that up, it works extremely well, and as odd as it may seem, Chucky and Tiffany really do have a great on-screen chemistry. Also worth noting is John Ritter in a small role as the police chief who gets in the way of Chucky and Tiffany's plan and has to be dealt with accordingly. John Ritter is always a delight to see in pretty much any movie, in any role, no matter how small. He was one of the greats, and may he rest in peace. Oh yeah, and one of the main characters is actually played by Katherine Heigl before she hit it big with Grey's Anatomy. So in general, the cast is pretty good, pretty impressive, both on the human side and on the talking doll side. So, what else is there really to say? It's an extremely fun and entertaining movie. I do know that a lot of people don't like how it doesn't even try to be scary or suspenseful, but in all honesty, I did not miss any of that, and I did kind of prefer the more humorous aspects and how it tried to keep itself more fresh and modern, even going as so far as to pretty much breaking the fourth wall and deconstructing itself in scenes where Chucky and Tiffany argue over the best way to execute a murder and how to keep up with modern times. They need to be a little bit more creative. Ronnie Yu directed the movie, and as you may know, he later went on to direct Freddy vs. Jason 2. I can't say the guy is a master of horror or anything, and in fact he really lays on the cheese factor pretty thick, but he does it in such a way that is strangely satisfying. It's a really stupid movie if you want to pick it apart piece by piece, but it is very well done. If this is a B-grade horror flick about a wisecracking killer doll, then surely it is a masterpiece of B-grade wisecracking killer doll flicks. Great effects, great acting, great kills, great humor, one of the strangest sex scenes you'll probably ever see in a mainstream movie, and there isn't a dull moment. Bride of Chucky is a terrific piece of horror entertainment. From the very first 30 seconds of the movie, when globs of splooge run down the screen and semen fly at you like some demented James Bond title sequence, you know there's going to be something a little off with Seed of Chucky. Even though Chucky and Tiffany's plan failed in the last movie, it wasn't before Tiffany was able to squeeze out a demonic love child, leaving for a good cliffhanger at the end of Bride of Chucky. This one picks up the story a few years later, with said love child trying to track his parents down. He discovers they're in Hollywood, of all places, because they're filming a movie based on the mysterious murders of the previous film. He resurrects them with voodoo, because I guess the Hollywood studio somehow was able to obtain the actual dolls from the murders, or something like that, and this odd little family is united for the very first time. So naturally, they want to get out of those damn doll bodies. They concoct a plan to kidnap Jennifer Tilly, who is the star of the movie, since she looks and sounds exactly like Tiffany. Okay, so Tiffany can transfer her soul into her and be a movie star. But Chucky needs a body too, so the limo driver, who is secretly in love with Jennifer Tilly, should do well enough. But they also want to get a body for their new kids, so naturally their next logical step would be to impregnate Jennifer Tilly via Chucky semen in a turkey baster, so they can transfer their doll's child's soul into the human newborn. All while this child, named Glenn or Glenda, is struggling with his or her sexuality and not knowing whether he or she is male or female due to lack of distinguishing genitalia. All while Chucky and Tiffany are trying to decide that since they now have a family, they should be giving up murdering, but finding it just way too hard because murdering is so addictive, and oh my god, what the hell is this? I mean, seriously, for one thing, the whole movie within a movie cliche has been done to death, and though while in the right hands, yes, it can be done very good, in Seed of Chucky's case, it is just a mess. This is just a miserable movie that reeks of desperation, doing everything possible to get a laugh or seem fresh and inventive. Did you ever think that one day you'd have to sit through a Chucky movie where he jerks off in the bathroom? Did you ever think that one day you'd have to sit through a Chucky movie where he kills Britney Spears and says, "Oops, I did it again"? The whole thing seems like a weird dream you'd have rather than an actual movie. I loved Bride of Chucky, and I loved how it basked in its comedic side, but that movie, it knew its limits. Seed of Chucky just takes it way too far. Granted, there are some good lines, they slip in every now and then, and it does have a few good moments here and there, but for the most part, it is nowhere near as clever as it thinks it is. It is nowhere near as funny as it thinks it is. The jokes fall flat, the plot is needlessly complicated, The effects are just awful and cringe-inducing, and the end result is a movie that is practically unbearable to watch. I kind of hate this movie. Needless to say, this is the worst of all the 5 Chucky movies, and it is a shame that this had to be the final nail in the coffin before the series will inevitably be entering reboot territory, but you know what? After this mess, I think this would be one of the rare occasions where I would gladly welcome a fresh start. I say bring on the remake, whenever that may be.
Curse of Chucky. This is a brand new Chucky movie. It's not a remake, of course. It's not kind of one-off-ish, half remake, half reboot, half real sequel or whatever. No, it is actually, I mean, technically it's Child's Play 6. It does continue and expand upon the story. Even though, yes, it is straight to video, maybe the effects aren't that great, not as good as they could have or would have been if it were a theatrically released, higher budget kind of movie. So there's some shots in this movie, like, you know, when you see a CGI Chucky, that don't look good. Even the puppet doesn't look that good. Definitely not at the level that we've seen in the previous movies. So that's not that great. But what it kind of actually is, in a lot of ways, being the horror movie that it is, it's almost like kind of like one of those chamber dramas. You know what I mean? Like, tragedy brings this family together, and they're kind of a dysfunctional family. They all have secrets, and the secrets are unearthed, and nobody really trusts each other. But then a stranger comes with information from the past and unearths all these big revelations on them. But the catch to that is the stranger who comes in is a fucking doll, possessed by a serial killer. You do have like the husband and wife character who visit the sister, who's played by Fiona Dorff, Brad's daughter, of course. Fiona is the main character. Her sister and her husband come with their daughter after their mom dies. And Chucky's there too, because he's mysteriously sent in a package. And quite obviously, we do suspect that Chucky may have been the one to kill the mother. And kind of the reason why and what he's doing there is revealed throughout the movie. On the whole, movie does good fan service, so they're kind of going back to the roots. This isn't a terrifying movie, but I didn't think the first Child's Play, or the second, or the third, I didn't think they were that scary. They're kind of cheesy, and this one is kind of cheesy too. But it has some good scares to it. It does have jump scares and things like that. Good classic vintage Chucky, which I think people were clamoring for. They delivered, so I think this is a very appropriate final curtain, if it is indeed the final curtain to the Chucky series. I hope it's not. I mean, I'd like to see what more they have to do, but I think as it stands here, one, they told a good self-contained story. Two, they kind of connected it to the other movies. And three, they had the fan service. They, you know, brought it in spades, which was cool. Again, not perfect. Effects could have been better. It's, you know, not high art. It's a Chucky movie, but it's fun. I like it. Brad Dourif, as always, great voice as Chucky. Does a good job. Like, I think that's kind of the main appeal to the movie, is that even though the puppet doesn't look that great, you almost forget it because you're listening to Chucky and it's his voice, and you're kind of drawn to that. So, you know, Chucky could be a sock puppet. If it's Brad Dourif's voice, I think it's gonna get a lot of attention and draw you in. So. Credit to Brad Dourif, who's been the staple of the series, does a great job as Chucky. So, really liked all that, and really good movie. If you're a Chucky fan, I'm sure you'll like it, so definitely check it out. And that's the Child's Play series. I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Thumbs up for Chucky. And until next time, I'll see you later.